Go ahead.
Rami and Christine and everyone, thank you very much for having me today on for presentation. So thank you for the time, and it's a pleasure to be here at the FedEx Innovation Institute of Technology. I will go into my introduction. So goes too far. So everyone, my name is Mike McCoy. I am the Associate Director of Emerging Technology at Humana. What that means is here at Humana, we have a specific group that helps explore and examine what's out there in the world of technology, and then how we can make it applicable to the everyday business within Humana, which is primarily a health insurance company, but we're also a health and wellness company that create products, applications, and back-end services from a technical perspective as well. We do rapid early stage prototype and development for things like blockchain technology. For example, we have one of the largest healthcare insurance blockchain consortia within the Synaptic Health Alliance, as well as a specific product called Provider Data Exchange that I can talk about later. But in my evaluation within my day job and with my side job as an adjunct professor at a university hospital called Thomas Jefferson University, I conduct a couple things. One, I do research and create point of views and executive summaries and research papers around new and emerging concepts like blockchain, AI, machine learning, new and emerging technology. So I've done a lot of research recently and over the years in non-fungible tokens and this digital representations of art due to my past experience. Long story short, I got into blockchain and Bitcoin around 2015, 2016, first from investing and from friends working in these type of fields. But I actually, in 2017, I met a bunch of people at this venture production studio called Consensus, which builds a lot of Ethereum-based products. I joined onto the team in kind of an educational evangelization type of role, where I got to tell people how and why the Ethereum blockchain was special and how they could apply it to their business. And from there, I've kind of seen the evolution of NFTs from CryptoKitties to now it becoming a very interesting way to have digital representations that are beyond our scope. I also used to work in the strategic growth initiative for blockchain technology at Accenture, which is mostly a technology services company. And from there, we were actually pitching to companies like the NBA, like the NFL, and other organizations on how they could potentially use non-fungible tokens as digital representations. Even some of the larger multimedia companies and entertainment companies of how they could do that as well. I also am the chair, and how I got into healthcare per se is since 2008. I actually, from 2008 to 2015, I was working in healthcare administration at a provider organization in the Philadelphia suburbs. And I also, in between there, I had a career in sports television where I used to talk about sports on TV, in particular for ABC in Central Texas. But I'm through and through, I'm from Philadelphia, grew up in Philadelphia, and currently live in the Philadelphia suburbs now. So that's a little bit of my history. I'm also the chair of the Linux Foundation Hyperledger Healthcare Special Interest Group. We have meetings every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, as well as I'm a member of IEEE, HIMSS, ACT, IAC, etc. So that's me. And now let's get into NFTs. So what are NFTs, non-fungible tokens? I tried to make this as simple as possible so that anyone from a lay reader to someone who's never seen the topic before, to anyone that's very technical and in-depth could be able to have a good introduction on this topic. So to me, non-fungible tokens are more so a process, not a product. They are not a specific singular form. They're a way and a method to be able to digitally represent and attach and create value from owning something digitally. The Wikipedia type of term here is it's a term used to describe a unique digital asset whose ownership is tracked on a blockchain, right? But I think the larger concept here is we've had a lot of digital stuff in the world for many decades and years now. I can remember since when I was a kid in the 90s, being able to play video games and getting rewards and tokens by playing and being so hooked on those games and receiving a lot of value and saying, oh, I want to keep on building up these credits to go to the next level. Just even think about Mario, right? Or Mario Kart. You're playing Mario, you're bumping into things, you're receiving coins and tokens, and you're feeling rewarded, and it's a really cool feeling. There's digital things we've won through gaming and rewards we've got through gaming in digital worlds. And now there's actually more digital representations of things for our physical world that are coming into the fold that are actually being tracked and logged in our different databases, in some cases in our centralized databases. Now with the evangelization and the maturity of blockchain technology, you have the ability to have a representation, be able to attach to your digital representation of something that could be fully digital, or something that's a representation or a digital twin of something in the physical world, and being able to have a unique characteristic, a unique fungible, or sorry, non-fungible token represented to that. So for example, all the fungible things in the world aren't as relevant as to create a marketplace around here in this type of world. So fungible assets are coins. They're back in history, the people actually exchanged work and exchange services for logs and for things for your house, right? Even water was an exchange of currency. Corn was a famous exchange of currency too. And we have token reward points. We have credit cards that exchanges currency. Those are things that have been kind of widely appreciated on. But now we're talking about fungibility and fungibility of assets. And so when you think of semi-fungible tokens, it is, I will exchange work or I'll exchange services for a ticket, right? Or I'll like going to like a fair or festival, carnival, being able to actually do something to receive a reward for that. Or you go to a concert and you receive a shirt. Those things are semi-fungible as well. But the things that are non-fungible, non-fungibility adds scarcity and rarity to the actual product, to the actual thing you are representing in the digital world. So one, we have examples over here like CryptoKitties, which is for the very much crypto blockchain fanatics. But there's also the Mona Lisa, which is a rare, scarce painting, and there's only one copy of that, but there's many representations of that. How many representations of that are actually attributed to the artist is part of the question here. Your home is a non-fungible asset because there's only one home that is on one block in the actual world, right? And so having a digital copy, a representation of your home makes it then non-fungibles. And so on the left here, I have some tips on to think of how and why NFTs are more of a process and not a particular product. Because to NFT something is to assign it a distinct serial number that lives on a public blockchain. So you can be able to refer back to and understand the meaning and origin and the provenance of what other people say of where your digital representation comes from. Now, digital NFTs in general are just a wrapper. They convey no additional information about the purpose or the nature of the content being serialized. It just says, yes, this is a digital representation of the thing, and this is the IP, and this is the address, and this is the blockchain that is attributed to. And that's really it. They can be a broad asset of things, from digital goods, digital lands, and artwork to claim on a physical asset like real estate or clothing, but really they're digital files that are ownable. So instead of having a financial asset, right? Like I may pay for a specific type of software, or I may pay for a specific email account or address. Now you own the digital media or asset of that. Because you can even pay for a specific picture, right? Like I own a JPEG that I paid for online, or I pay for music, which is an MP3, like the actual song of that. When you create the NFT, you are uploading that and making sure it is visible and public to a blockchain that anyone can track its provenance and attribution. Are there any questions on that in particular? Cool. Glad to see we all know what NFTs really are. Any questions on the basics whatsoever? Awesome. I'll move on. Now, in order to think about NFTs and how they're compiled, right, I wanted to go into some technical terms, but not overly technical terms. So within the Ethereum blockchain world, there are these type of standards called ERCs. ERCs are able to, they're kind of like methodologies or frameworks to follow when building these cryptographic tools in a public blockchain network. And so some of the famous ones are ERC20, ERC721, and ERC1155. So ERC20 here, as I labeled, they map addresses to the amounts of how much something is, right? So if I were to showcase this line of code, right? This line of code actually equals 20 coins. That if I were to distribute this code to someone, you will receive 20 coins, et cetera for 30, et cetera for 10, right? ERC 721 maps unique IDs to specific owners. So on here, we label that Kitty1 is represented to this specific unique ID or code, and that goes down the line, et cetera. For ERC 1155, it has a nested mapping of IDs to owners and amounts. So 1155 combines the concepts of ERC 20 and 721 to really give value to unique identifiers, as well as how much and what is the context of those unique identifiers. Just like in our internet history, for those that are very much familiar with the way the internet and these modules and concepts were formed, we have these protocols in stateless communication realms such as TCP/IP, HTTP, et cetera, and they are able to help us communicate data and information in open source methods. But in the open source, it's more of the providers like Microsoft and Apple that are providing these worlds for you to interchange and exchange information. Those are the ones that are mostly, and Google for the most part, are the ones creating these platforms and creating those information channels together, but you don't have ownership of those. And just like there's content standards too, like we have specific file formats like HTML, JSON file formats. These NFTs give you the ability to own and shape and are able to attribute value to data, unlike our traditional internet methods have done before. Any questions on this concept, on these concepts in particular?
Hey, Mike. This is Ron. I have a question about the ERC 1155. If you give me an NFT, as you show, that's 20 swords. That's the quantity of swords.
Mm-hmm.
How can you give me 50 after I own? Can the NFT token that I own have the sword values specifically increased, and I keep the same token ID, or do you have to give me a second token with 30 additional swords?
Correct. The second part, I have to give you another unique identifier so that every single payment that's attributed to data or the context has a record of it. I can't. So in public blockchains at current state now, you create a new record or method for each time you make a payment that's attributed to a special NFT.
Okay. All right. So I'm repeating what you said differently. Is I can't increase the value of 20 swords to 30 to 50. Excuse me. I have to get a second token.
Yeah,
and then I'll add the two values,
the
two values together to determine that I have 50 swords.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a wee question as well, please.
Yeah, please.
See, if you think of supply chain asset tracking, which standard, like it looks to me like ERC 20 is pretty useless. You would at least want like an ERC 721, right? Like if it's about, think about like companies who have, whatever, oil rigs or whatever, and they want to track the components of those. You'd be more interested in ownership rather than in value, or am I going wrong here?
No, you're kind of right on that. First, in a lot of like asset tracking, you mostly want to create private blockchain like networks for this, because the assets only matter to the people that are involved in the network. So think about I work in a lot of pharmaceutical worlds, right? So when rare or scarce materials like pharmaceutical drugs, right, when they go across supply chain, the people that really care about them are the pharmaceutical company that creates it, the manufacturing distributors that are a part of that process, the organization that's distributing them, like let's just say the pharmacy within the United States, and then the owner of it, right? But if it's a good that's used outside of network, it's outside to many of people, right? then you would want to have different representations, different access into that. And so for asset tracking in particular, if your asset is scarce, right, where there's only a limited supply of it, that's where this makes sense. But if your asset is abundant, right, and it's not very rare, and you want to be able to track many of that, this isn't the most efficient way to do so.
So if you think about inventory tracking them, like, which is consumables and stuff, would you then not use an NFT approach? So you wouldn't track the single, so from like a box of pills, you would give this a separate approach?
No, so like this is just a digital way to represent the physical, right? And so it doesn't so like NFTs aren't very smart, right? They just are able to log the result of something. And if you needed the context of that, you may need to use like a specific application layer, like another domain on top, to be able to make more sense. And there's some companies and products that are out there, that are able to add on another layer of detail and definition to an NFT. But yes, underlying all this at the bottom of it, you could have just like a representation that, yes, this is how much something is worth. But if you're doing it in transit, you'll probably want to understand that, like, yes, this is a unique identifier for it, and that's where you use ERC 721, because you want to be able to follow that, like that code here, that the OXABDE was represented to the kitty, and every time that kitty goes and you want to find the hash or the reference code of that, it is that same number, right? So in supply chains, depending if you're distributing scarce resources, you would want to know those specific details of its originality and its provenance, but not in every case you want to do that.
Well, okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah, I think it's maybe this will go into some details that'll help you. So what can you actually do with NFTs? I think this is more the simpler term of helping and why you would use it. So there's three really general use cases, and I'll show you more examples of how it's better when it's linked to the IP and digital reference. So for one use case, you're either buying, selling a digital representation that goes directly to the creator or something. This is known very public now from the NBA Top Shot example, where you have NBA trading cards that the NBA owns and they distribute, or sorry, the NBA is the creator because they own the content and the video of an athlete doing a specific layup or a three-pointer or a dunk, right? And so they put it on their platform, which is Top Shot, and they are buying and they're selling the rights to fans who are buying that representation that goes to NBA, the creator. There's other examples of this when it comes to music. So I am a music artist, I sing, I create a song. I put it, either I show you a representation of my NFT in particular that shows, yes, I, the creator, have created this, and I can either put it on a platform for others to try and find, or I could send it to you directly in, and through a public blockchain service. But a lot of those are, but you won't want to put information on there that is potentially compromisable, right? Like if there's something in the identification or my unique identifier that ties me to my IP address, and my IP isn't completely secured and I'm not comfortable with my IP being on a public blockchain, then I wouldn't do something like that. But that's why people will go towards platforms or third parties, so that the creator wouldn't. It's a double-edged sword, right? If I'm a creator and I'm selling directly to Marketplace has my info and they can be able to take advantage of it. Whereas if I'm just selling to a platform, then the platform protects my information and then it's distributed out to others. That's where I maintain security, but I have an ability to extend and scale to many others. But then platforms at certain times will take advantage of the charges and the fees as it becoming on the platform. And there's many things that we've obviously seen in Web 2.0 methods where platforms take advantage of the actual marketplace and either raise prices or limit access or deplatform someone, etc. And so those are use cases within there. And then there's also, unfortunately, the way to misrepresent, buy, or sell, or claim ownerships to someone's digital representation. For example, in the news recently, and this is only with the music I'm describing, but the Wu-Tang Clan, which is a rap band, actually posted art on a NFT platform, and they were claimed to be misrepresenting someone else's art that actually wasn't theirs. And so in these type of NFT platforms, you do have the very real ability to post something on there, claim the ownership when you're not actually the owner. And so those are really the three cases that you can go through this. The way NFTs make sense for pro use cases, and when there's a tight linkage between the IP, because NFTs wrap to they're really just a digital wrapper that is hashed on a blockchain that refers to an IP. And when you have a great connection to the IP and the digital reference of what something is, and when you have assurances that this actual NFT is exclusive, that there's only a rare or limited amount of this digital product, service, or good. And those are really the use cases where I see NFTs really making impact. Does that help, Chris, in understanding the use case a bit?
Yeah, well, we just go back to these card collections and stuff. I'm more thinking, see, when we talk about blockchain is so great for supply chain tracking and asset tracking, and it's going to make you know, doing your books so much easier because no reconciliations and all that sort of jazz. Is there all NFT based eventually, or is there something else I'm missing? How you track those either fixed assets, so long-term assets, or these short-term assets like inventory items?
Yeah, so for public assets, so for supply chain tracking, it's mostly beneficial in private permissioned consortia because the information you're giving up has to and can only be accessed from those people in that network. But if you're having a public blockchain, having a public supply chain tracking use case isn't really valuable unless you're exchanging a public good. So let's just say you're moving like a piece of art that is owned by the federal government or a specific thing that's owned by your federal government. You releasing the information of how and when that good or service is being tracked and distributed is valuable. But if it's not a public good or not a public service, it probably isn't valuable to have on a public blockchain.
Yeah, no, but I don't know why we're going there. But like, let's forget about whether this is a public or a private blockchain. The thing that I'm tracking, am I tracking this as an NFT representation or as some other type of token?
It would just be another type of token, unless you need to really know the origin of something within the supply chain. If you need, if you can tie that digital IP to the actual physical thing, it's very hard, right? Because long story short, I could drive a truck and I could drive from Philadelphia, where I'm based, to Los Angeles. And in between, like, I could give a parcel of that truck, right? It depends on your QR code, it depends on your labeling. If you have a digital representation for everything that's in that truck, or you just have a label of the truck itself, and you're just scanning, yes, that truck made it through this bar and code. There's just so many intangibles in the real world that you can't encounter or you can't prevent in the digital world. Like, yes, you can use sensor tech to say like, oh, there was actually a person that went into the truck at this time, or the truck was less amount of pounds at this point and was you know, there's different sensor tech, there's different technologies you can do to measure this, but it's very hard to, for non-digital assets, when they're off chain and they're in the physical world, there's just a lot of variables that can go in between all that.
Hmm. Yeah, okay.
Any other questions on some of these like use cases? I go into some dream use cases in a second, but for the basis of NFTs, does anyone have any questions on this?
Yeah, Mike, this is Ron again. So either now or later, can you possibly provide any resource for this? It would be nice for me to be able to reason the limitations of the NFT use case. You know, if I have a certain interest in implementation, I'd like to be able to evaluate, okay, is maybe this NFT, maybe the NFT model doesn't fit, or I'm trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And if you have any suggestions on how to be more skilled at making those decisions, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to go into some use cases in particular, and we'll kind of go yes or no, and that may help with your clarity there. But it's really if you have a rare or scarce resource that can't be replicated very easily, and you really need to know the origin of where that thing is and where it came from digitally, right? Like the IP of where it was created, the time at which it was created, the amount of, if let's just say I have, you know, I have a specific amount of photos that I'm releasing out to the public of myself. Like a really good example is my driver's license, right? I want to create an NFT of my driver's license, but I'm only paying for the compute to NFT about 5 of these because it's only relevant for me to give to the DMV, or it's relevant to give for me purchasing my house, or whatever. But I want to make sure that no one's copying or taking another representation of my digital ID and using it for another type of term or service, right? That could be a way to do so. As just another method. It's really just, and NFTs are really just, it's a file, as I mentioned before. It's hold on, sorry. Okay. So that's why, like, I like to highlight NFTs are a way to make digital files ownable, right? So you're owning the specific JPEG, you're owning the specific MP3, the MP4, whatever it is. If you can't tie your asset to an actual digital type of representation, whether it's a JPEG, a document, a PowerPoint, whatever, right? Like I can create an NFT on this PowerPoint and say, I want to make sure no one else is taking my content that I'm selling to you, the FedEx group here, that I'm distributing or speaking of. I want to make sure that that file is forever just attributed to me. I'll create a non-fungible token of that, or representation of it, for others to be able to make sure that no one else is taking my word or taking my ideas and putting them together.
So Mike, I guess, do you envision an NFT to have a use case as a medical record where you can
Yeah.
But how do you manage, or is the ERC standard give you the power to add and subtract or remove and replace things, or is that, am I saying it wrong? Is it just you only add? In other words, like is there limitations where you could not store a patient's balance, financial balance? You could only store medical diagnostic tests and
That's a great question.
their history. Yeah,
I think I know what
yeah.
you're getting at.
How do you add and can you add and subtract? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So one, it's a very tough problem to do, and there's so many data semantic representation issues. Like we measure weight in the United States differently than people in EU and around the world, right? That don't always translate. You need to get a calculator out. It's just not a seamless process. But I think for use cases of originality, right, like representations of an ERC, like you can have prior history, like prior authorization and prior medical history details associated to your NFT, but then every single time you were to leave, you will have to be able to update and create a new NFT of that most updated record. And so that can be a computationally heavy and timely process if you were to NFT medical records.
Good. Yeah, good. Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah.
My body and history today is useful, but is it going to be as useful in a year? I just don't know. I'm going to constantly, every time I travel, I'll have to update my ERC, because really, like, think of even this as like my medical record. Like, let's just think I'm a squid here, right? And these are the details associated to me. This is the metadata of my record. And then this is the contract in the ERC, and the ERC is a smart contract, right? So it just says that Mike, through these, like I'm speaking beyond what this actual line of code is saying, but Mike at this time has this medical history due to this date of April 20, 2021, right? And then this is the details associated to that. If I were to go overseas, right, and if I receive care because I trip and fall and I'm in London, right, they wouldn't be able to add to my record. They would just be able to reference the history of it. That would be so that's a valuable use case. But then if you're going from London, I receive care there, and then I'm going into Australia, or I'm going into China after there, it's very tough to make sure the ERC is going to be represented and then is made portable for you to be able to take to all those different places. And right now we don't have the infrastructure, the global infrastructure in place, but I hope one day we could, or potentially it could be possible, but it would be a heavy computational load to do, because NFTs are, expensive, and not all are expensive, especially when zero knowledge cryptography makes these things more scalable. But at the time they are fairly
So
expensive.
Mike, does infrastructure imply standards, medical standards, or data standards? Is that what you're?
Yeah, that's
that
part of
what
the
that means?
problem.
Okay.
Part of the problem is not all data across the world for medical records talks to each other, and that's why there's methods of FHIR, Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources, or HL7, Health Level 7 type of records, so that you can have these talk overseas and talk digitally rather than we can in language or the written word, right? And so there's methods to that. But I do want to, before we go into, I wanted to showcase some interesting NFC use cases to kind of expand your thinking and maybe help you understand like how these could be relevant. So in the world of blockchain and healthcare in particular, there's a lot of talk of being able to have an NFT representation of a scarce resource like your DNA and genomic sequence, right? Because me as a person, my original DNA and genomic sequence is original to myself, and there's only one Mike McCoy, at least that I know of, in the world today that could be able to represent that sequence. And so being able to have an NFT wrapped around my DNA, because my DNA is not going to change anytime soon, that you can be able to represent that DNA and be able to have that be portable all across the world. There's also, I didn't mean to be partners, I meant to be pathways, neurological pathways and frequencies. So our original thought and our original minds, right? All our brains and our neurons kind of move and have specific frequencies that are related and are intrinsically valued to us as individuals. Those representations can be very valuable, because the brightest minds in the world, if you wanted to at some point, especially for lie detector tests, or if you wanted to be able to really validate that someone took a specific test or displayed their mental fortitude a specific way, you can actually have an NFT represent someone's neurological pathways and frequencies to be able to understand, well, hey, those pathways didn't match this person who took the test. If you had like, a neurological monitor on someone, like a Neuralink, such as what Elon Musk and Tesla is producing. But those are some concepts you can think of. And anything, and I'm staying with the healthcare side because I'm kind of used to it every day, anything that's a digital twin or human representation of yourself from prior history could be a use case or concept there. But I also think there's a way you could be able to NFT self-improvement habits and workout routines, and you could probably create a marketplace on this. So for example, I like to give the story of Michael Jordan, right? Kobe Bryant's a better example. Kobe Bryant unfortunately passed away February of 2020, but he was very much known for working out at specific hours, doing specific routines, having a diet that was very much lean, veggie-based, etc., that made him very successful at basketball. What he could do is he could list down all his like daily regimens, routines, and requirements, NFT that, sell it out to other potential athletes or aspiring athletes, young athletes, people that want to be able to become a pro basketball player. And he could be able to, on a marketplace, sell those details and descriptions out there and receive benefit for it. Because a lot of times athletes and people that are just very good at their craft in general, they don't have as much of an incentive to be able to share the secrets of their trade or the secrets of what made them very successful. And through an NFT type of marketplace, you could be able to represent yourself and put it out there in the open in the world. And you can have a digital proof that, hey, this was actually my work. This is what made me successful. And I'm the person that is successful. So, you know, that attribution is there. And that's a decent linkage that you could be able to create a connection point there to make sure that's not a fraudulent workout routine or so on and so forth. And there's other things on here. I have like federally owned infrastructure, such as road, lands, rails, housing. I think this is, if you were to create an NFT, let's just say a historical museum, right? Let's just say you're in a city or town in the United States where it's hard for the museum to keep running, but a lot of the locals believe this is a thing we want to keep up, et cetera. Instead of having just the museum or maybe the local government charge you taxes to be able to pay for that museum or whatever the community is paying for that, you could distribute the ownership and say, hey, we could be able to raise funds through an NFT to be able to keep this museum up or this historical landmark up. And anyone around the world, not just within the United States or the community, anyone in Australia, anyone in Africa, in EU, in London, UK, you could be able to help support this this part of land or this historical monument so that you could be able to keep it afloat, but you would pay mostly in crypto or digital first payments to be able to do that and expand your playing field of just within your local community or whoever takes just US fiat dollars, and you're able to expand that. And so I think it could be very interesting to democratize and distribute funds for things that people actually care about, right? And if someone's putting an NFT there for something that not anyone cares about, well, then that thing will go away. And I think it'll be interesting to see how people decide and create those type of marketplaces. And then I also put on here any naming service like online domains, like you can NFT it.com, you can NFT your license plate, you can NFT yourself, but your information will be compromised on a public blockchain as well. So there's a risk and reward when it comes, when you NFT something, you want to make sure there's no compromising personal identification information or personal health information that is attributed to the NFT as it is then gone. But any questions on these particular use cases?
Mike, you may be going here, but is there a thought on a private NFT blockchain network versus public?
Yeah, of course. Private NFTs are what platform companies have. So when you think of it, if I'm Facebook and I'm creating, you know, like this digital piece of art, only Facebook users could be able to see it, buy it, and own it. Whereas like, you know, so the platform companies already create their privatized NFTs, and there's other examples beyond just Facebook and the social network companies, but yeah, those are all relevant and kind of out there. They just haven't cryptographically hashed it to something, because in private networks, it's not as relevant to need cryptographic principles to be able to do it, because you're in a already trusted network. And usually when you enter into a platform or a private network, you're giving up some type of detailed information associated to you so that you can be held responsible within that network.
We can lower the cost and process it, potentially. Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, Mike, sorry. So that dovetails onto a previous mention of like music and art with, you know, it's DRM, right?
Digital rights management, yeah.
Yeah, protecting. So I understand when you're in a private network, you have much better control. But if music and art is sold with these NFTs, is there currently a mechanism, a software mechanism that helps to protect the artist's IP?
Yes, there are platforms like Super Rare, like Rarity. There's so many NFT platforms now. Even my old employer Consensus has something called Palm NFT, which allows you to do a very similar thing. That's where, for a specific fee or a specific percentage of your sales, this platform will protect the details associated to you. They'll hold your private keys, they'll hold your cryptographic keys too, and do other type of things so that you, the owner, don't have to worry about potentially being compromised or taken advantage of through these networks or functions.
So I think I understand, but I'm suggesting if like CryptoKitties or CryptoPunks, the art,
Yeah.
I can download the JPEG or the PNG file to my computer and, you know, make a pirated copy or whatever you want to call it, a facsimile. Is that, what do you think about that? Or is that protection down the road where I buy an NFT on OpenSeas and it has art in it, that new funky
Yep.
art, and I
So there's one rule of thumb there is the timestamp. If you look at the timestamp, the original creator posted it before you copied it. And so on the public blockchain, on the blocks, right, on the actual blockchain, you can go and follow that actual code, right? So let's just say we're going back to this original code thing here, right? You could see that I, Mike McCoy, who's the original creator, posted it at 3:45 p.m. Whereas you, Ron, posted it at 4 p.m. Most likely the person who posted it first was the person who had the originality.
Okay, all right, thanks, Mike.
And now I will showcase it out to all potential. This is opening the box, right, on what NFT cases could kind of look like, right? And this is a list I came up with about, I don't know, 2 years ago or so, 3 years ago, I believe, about all the different ways that you can use blockchain in these type of use cases. There's a method you could use NFTs for all these different fields and worlds, though it would be it would only be for original, scarce, and digitally represented assets to IP that could be relevant here. But this is to expand some thought on things beyond just the examples I gave earlier. So any questions on some of these use cases and how you can potentially use NFTs as a reference?
I have another one that I would like your opinion on.
Please.
See, there's this idea of sort of monetizing the environment, because there's so much lost value at the moment, the way we treat and mistreat the environment. And so you could consider like a city park, which improves mental health of people or whatever, because they can go jogging and so on. So who should pay for this? Should it just be the city council, or should actually the companies who employ people in the area, chip in? But then how would you represent, like, would you represent the park then through an NFT, and then sort of, this is like a really immature idea in my head, but I've heard people speak about this, so I don't quite get it. Like, would the park be an NFT?
Yeah, so whoever owns the park, right, which I would assume would be the city or the town, right? And it could be the people, because then they pay taxes on that park, right? So in my community here in the Philadelphia region, our taxes pay for a park. It's right down the street that's walkable for me, right? And so if you're actually quantifying and valuing out that park in the environment, right? So you could have something called carbon credits, which is something that a lot of people are targeting, right? And I think we have it actually here on this list somewhere. Maybe there's hydrocarbon accounting, but anyway, so what you could do is, okay, in this park, we are actually building X amount of trees, and those X amount of trees are building X amount of O2 into the environment and what have you, right? We are actually going to, because the amount of trees of the park is it's a scarce resource. There's an original actual sole location where that park can actually be. Yes, you could be able to create an NFT and then distribute out how many people want to pay towards the park, or want to pay to adding additional features like trees, like things that are good for the environment, right? Or you could be able to say you can only access this park if you have an NFT unique ID, or like you can get a unique identifier, remember? for an ERC 721 for the park, or you could even have a specific ERC 1155 code that says, I paid 20, let's just say your fiat currency is US dollars. I paid $20. Here's my unique ID code to say, I, Mike McCoy, am a member of this park and I'm paying towards making it a better resource for the environment. There is a method to be able to do that. So you're mapping your unique ID, you're having a nested mapping of IDs to the numerous amounts that are paid to that single park, which is the ERC 1155 method is representing the park.
But if you wanted to keep it like more of a common good, so say the argument is, well, employing companies in the area should chip in because they have less staff take time off sick because the mental health is improved, because the neighborhood is nicer and whatnot.
Yeah.
Then you don't really want an access pass, right? You want, I don't get my head around where the ownership lies, or make it more complicated. Say we're talking about like an elephant, what do you call this in English? Like, a pack of elephants in Africa. And you follow that elephant family, and then today they have 10 members, and then 2 are born, one is killed, and then you have 11. Like, does that value then change? Of like, does it make sense to assign an NFT, and does the value change with the number of
what you
animals?
could do is you could write an NFT to each elephant. You could make an elephant a unique ID because they're a scarce animal representation, right? But is there a way? So the only way is if you have some type of technology that could monitor whether their heart keeps on beating or not, or whether they're, and once that's gone, then the resource is gone out from the population. And so that's a lot of technology to build for that certain thing, right? And some of these things like NFTs don't solve the problem of context and why and how something's built. It just is a digital representation of something. It's us as people that have to be able to believe and understand the concept of why and how these specific resources are being measured or are being labeled, and that's where the real value comes in.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how, like, whether NFTs have a place in this sort of environmental accounting, because like it wouldn't make sense to assign an NFT to a single elephant, because like you say, it dies eventually. But a family, even though the composition of that elephant family changes.
Here's something too to add, Chris, on there. All these ERCs are just ways you could use smart contract code to be able to smart contracts are just automated transactional script, right? It's just code is law, code is as an agreement. So if in your contract you say, well, if 20 to 33% of the population of the elephants die, then someone needs to be able to be held responsible or be paid or do something for that, right? Those are ways you can create smart contracts for those negotiations. I'm not sure if it's an NFT particular case, but I know you can use smart contracts in particular to negotiate how and why you're transacting goods and services and reprimanding people as well. But then someone on smart contracts, both parties have to agree. So if one party doesn't agree, then your smart contract's useless. Then you have to reconcile and go to court. And so that's like, but if people agree to the standards of the smart contract, but that's the thing, people don't always agree when it comes to everything. So the more binary you can be in those use cases, the better, because then you don't have to reconcile and have people be able to be humans and organize things out.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Right, I'll keep pondering about this. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I keep thinking about it too all the time. It's like, what can we use smart contracts for as much as possible? And I just keep going back to the thing of, we as people, the more human we could be, the more times we can go, like, so tough problems are actually the things that make us most human, right? If you go to someone, they say yes or no, like, that's great, but anytime you have a yes or no answer to something, when there doesn't need to be context, that's where you can use smart contracts, and that's where you can use automatic code transcripts. And that's where you could say yes or no, this person owns something that's digital representation, right? For all the other human things of, well, Mike uploaded this record at 340, whereas Ron uploaded it at 350. Mike is actually the real owner of that IP and of that real art. Like no one else is. Like these are just tools and assistive tools to help us understand and help us have an understanding of origin and provenance of things. And that's really what NFTs give that basic value for, best value for.
And is there a way of, or has anybody thought about like renting out NFTs, like instead of passing them on?
Yeah, so like NFTs, NFT is the landlord, but you can make sure that the landlord is who they say they are. I think renting, you'd have to create so many different, like you could give out who owns the NFT, right? Like you could distribute that, or you can create a sub to it, but it wouldn't be as valuable, I guess, because it's just to know the originality or the original owner.
To play with that, Mike, you could do an art piece that you actually want to rotate. So every 6 months, it just has a token that expires.
Yeah, and you could have multiple people that own an NFT. So it doesn't have to be just one person. Like
Right.
we could, in this whole group here, we could own a house, right? And our laws in the smart contract of that standard, of the ERC standard, we could then state, oh, well, Mike will have the house from January, for the month of January, yet Chris will have it in February, and we'll create those rules in the code for that. There's ways to do that for sure. So Chris, in your renting experiment, you could say Mike through 2021 will be the owner of this house, which is represented as an NFT until this date. And then from that date, I, the original landlord of it, will have it back, or I grant it to this other address, et cetera, or user.
So, and that would be through smart contracts that you arrange that transfer?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay,
So
interesting.
you guys just help me out. If we're time constrained, but in the gaming world, if I have a gun that I own and it's an NFT,
Mhm.
and I wanted to let my friend borrow it, I could rent it to him, could I?
Yes, you could distribute ownership, or you, the original owner, could say, hey, I, through this certain amount of time, through a smart contract, will give ownership of this NFT to someone else. Though it would always be known that you were the original owner, right?
Okay.
It's just like when you go on a tree, right? You go on a tree bark and you're the first person on the top writing on the tree bark, right? With your initials. And then people go down, 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 lower on the tree bark, right? Or whatever cut is freshest, or whatever cut is most dull, you can kind of tell, right? That's like, those are the concepts of NFTs. It's just a record of who it's transferring of ownership. It finds the original owner, but then you can make a new owner of that thing as time goes on.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions? It's our official Q&A segment.
Great job, Mike.
Thank you. And if anyone wants to get in contact with me, thank you all for the time. This is my work email. This is I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Twitter at that address, and Mike McCoy, PHL. PHL stands for Philadelphia, like the airport. And sometimes, I haven't done it in a while, but I actually have a couple in draft. Some musings I have around blockchain and the world of digital identity and all these things that I'm going to post on my Substack very, very soon. It will happen within the week or two. You can be able to just follow on mikemccoy.substack.com. And yeah, I work in the blockchain consortia and I help do blockchain strategy there, but I do many other things besides just blockchain. And I think NFTing certain things, like, as I mentioned here, if I could be able to get some traction on some of these use cases and make it relevant, I think maybe worth something. But yeah, any other questions? We have 2 minutes.
I just want to say thanks, Mike. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. This is Christina, and we're really looking forward to your next talk too. In is it May 4th?
May
Yeah,
the fourth
I
be
was
with
just going to
you.
say that. Yeah, our next session is going to be on May 4th. Mike will be talking about blockchain beyond healthcare. So very excited about that. So it's the same registration link if you want to go re-register, or if you already have, it'll be the same Zoom link. So please feel free to join us at that time. Any more questions, any more comments before our session ends here today?
No, thanks, Mike, for your patience with the questions. And guys, the time is good for me, like, because it's like 9 o'clock now, so I'm still awake. So.
That's how we scheduled it for people pretty much around the globe
Cool.
to join us.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.